And Black excellence is not meant to fix Black children, right? Black children are already excellent. And I think when we see Black excellence plans, for example, initially, and this isn't any offense towards because I don't think leaders were well prepared for how to do this well and how to shift their paradigm to make this really purposeful. But when, for example, we see a Black excellence plan, say, oh, we're going to teach our Black children grit. No, no, no. Like our Black children already have grit.
Oh yeah.
We're not here to fix. This is not meant to fix Black kids, right? Black excellence for me is how are we establishing the conditions in every school and every space so that our Black students can walk into their own excellence and they have the opportunity to walk into the excellence they already have. They're already excellent, but the conditions that have been prevalent in schools and in the educational system have prevented our Black students from thriving in the ways that they could thrive if those conditions had been different. And so I think Black excellence for me is really on the mindset of the adults and on the system to establish the conditions for our Black students to walk into the excellence they already have, right? It's all about conditions, and the conditions have not been ideal for Black and brown children.
We talk about equity as opportunity, dignity, and love.
Yes.
Every kid, whatever it takes, we're going to give you as many opportunities as you need in order for you to achieve the excellence we know you can. Yeah. We're going to treat you with dignity. You're worth it. You are worth it. It's not your story. It's not your current circumstances. It's the potential.
Correct.
And you're loved. We love you. Of course.
Right.
You're here with us. We're part of the family. I assume now that we started a new school year, you have a new set of schools, a new team. So yes. What is it looking like every day for you?
So this year I have 16 schools. So we had the reorganization in the district, and I have all the pathway schools. And so that's the largest collaborative right now. And so 16, that's a pretty big number. And so right now what's filling up my calendar is just getting around, in these first few weeks with staff and students, just getting around to visit, say hi to the leaders, see what the students are up to, kind of check in on all of the neat activities they're doing, assemblies and welcome back events, et cetera, and just visiting the schools to say hi. I think something that we're really looking at the beginning of the year is looking at that safe and welcoming environment, which is, I'm really excited that we're focusing on that this year as a district. Like, it's an actual focus because it's so critical after the trauma and the challenges our students and staff and our families have gone through over the past few years with COVID and the pandemic and all the things. Just getting around to see what different schools are doing to create that welcoming environment. And what's really great is we're hearing most of the leaders, if not all of the leaders thus far, saying things are going so well, in comparison to last year when things just hit so hard, right? Even at the beginning of the year, it was just such a difficult first half of the year. To see students coming back, we have quite a few schools. I know enrollment is down, but there are quite a few schools that have more students than they were anticipating, and just really enjoying being there and feeling good being in the building. And teachers too. I know there was some concern that teachers were stressed or coming back or worried, and because of what impacted them last year, which was significant, but we're noticing that safe and welcoming environment in all of our buildings. So just getting around and seeing that has been really exciting over the past few weeks.
Yeah, I would have to say also that here at my school, similar things are happening. We're having an over-enrollment, which is always a great thing for us to just don't have to worry too much about budget and all the implications of having low projections. So we're over-enrolled as well. And my teachers are very happy.
Good.
They even before the school year, even before the contract started for teachers, they were already reaching out. Hey, when can I go to the building? I want to start getting, I want to get started with my classrooms. And the energy has been definitely very special, very positive. And families as well. Like, all families are, bringing their kids on time. There is not we are not seeing those patterns of tardiness yet. it obviously might happen, but
Sure.
there is definitely this willingness to make things work and to have a very special year.
Good.
And I love the fact that as a district, we're focusing on making sure that is the number one priority as we start. So,
Yes.
but 16 schools is a
16.
lot.
Yep. 16 is a lot, but I love it because as a former Pathways principal, the fact that I get to work with the Pathways schools is a very special community of students, of families, of teachers, of leaders. Getting to work with those schools is really, that was kind of my dream job. So I'm really excited. Those 16, it's a lot, but I'm really thrilled and honored to be working with those schools.
Yeah, I'm sure, especially because of how meaningful your experience was at your own school.
Yes.
When you were a school principal, which we will get into it in a little bit. First, I wanted to know if you could help everybody listening understand what a pathway school is and what's the difference between a pathway and any other model, because I know the challenges, the unique challenges that come with being in a pathway school, but I would love to hear a clear definition if you have one.
Right. Yes. So pathway is really the DPS definition, right? But really the state definition is it's an alternative education campus or an AEC. You'll hear that sometimes in lieu of a pathway. But pathways, excuse me, pathways are really schools that serve students for whom the traditional schooling experience has not worked, right? And so often we have students who have been in a traditional comprehensive high school, and this is not saying anything against comprehensives, they're great. And for some students, the traditional model just doesn't seem to work. And so pathways really are smaller. We have smaller class sizes. You won't see a pathway school that's like 600 students. They have to be small because we have to be able to provide very personalized, individualized attention to each individual student. Because we'll have students who have dropped out and haven't been in school for 2 years, 3 years. We have students with very unique challenges, like, my former school was for teen mothers. So we had pregnant and parenting teens that offers up a wide variety of different challenges they're going to face that can be barriers to completing their education. And so pathway schools are there to really work to remove those barriers, or at least to say, yes, these are barriers, and we're going to provide the resources and support to help you get around those so you can still complete your education. And so pathways, we have to do things very differently. Our schedules are often different. Traditional high schools will be on a semester model. They have 2 semesters. Pathways often have something different, like quarters. I have schools who are on quarters, schools who are on trimesters, schools who are on like 5 terms. So they schedule very specifically to meet the unique needs of their kids. They have specific classes, like at Florence Crittenton, because it was a teen mom school, we had parenting class as an elective. We had art therapy to really address trauma. So pathways are really to provide alternative, as the word says, alternative pathways for students to graduate and succeed in school when the traditional model just hasn't worked for them. And they've seen great, a lot of success. I mean, especially in terms of growth. In pathways, we focus a lot. Yes, we hit the rigor. We have the same high expectations for our kids as any other school. And we know our kids are coming in, many of them at a disadvantage. And so we really focus on growing students and accelerating that growth for our students in schools to make sure they can get to graduation, but also prepare for what they really want to do beyond graduation. So lots of different models, courses, strategies that we implement in the 16 schools to meet the unique needs of those kids.
I think that's also a great opportunity to systemically think about what equity is and how we see each kid in their own sets of challenges as individuals and how can we serve their needs. I love that this is not the first time I hear you talk about pathways, and I love that every time you talk about it, you get so excited, so passionate. Like it's something I couldn't not think of somebody somebody more qualified and more dedicated to this population than you. So I'm so happy that you're leading that program.
Yeah.
Every time you talk about it, you get super excited. Like there is this fire that comes from you that makes it obvious that you care a whole lot about this specific way of educating our kiddos and also that specific population. It makes me wonder about your story, your personal, your leadership story, and how you were able to develop yourself as a leader, as a educator that cares so much about it. Would you be able to maybe share with us a little bit about where your story is coming from, the awesome leader you are today?
Oh, thank you. Yes. So way back, my father was always, I always saw him as a leader. So he was a leader he in a different field, but he was a manager at Denver Health, always led teams, led clinics. And so I think that was my example from the very beginning, right? That as a Black man, as he was coming up, he really was probably one of the only Black men in his field when he started, right? Especially in Denver. And so to see him walk through that and really, as a leader, succeed in his role, I think that was kind of a privilege for me as well, right? Is that I had that role model, that example from a very young age that I could do the same. It also showed me that as I got older and started getting into positions, that the leader really had a huge impact on the quality of the work that people could do, right? And so this is when I really started to think about what's the difference between a leader and a manager. I mean, I've had plenty of managers, not only in this field, in any job, whether it's in college or whatever, you have lots of managers. The difference when I experienced a leader was significant, right? Like there was just a different level of quality of work that was happening around me, that the quality of work that I could put into into what I was doing when I had a leader who would build me up, who would motivate, who had a vision, all those pieces of leadership that go beyond just managing the technical aspects of the job. And so as I got into education, when I noticed, I was very lucky, I had quite a few principals and assistant principals who were leaders and not managers. And I saw the difference they made, in teachers' lives and kids' lives and parents' lives. And so at first when I got into education, I didn't think I wanted to be a principal. There was no way. I was like, no, I love teaching. I love being in the classroom. I love the kids. I love the camaraderie with my other fellow colleagues. And then I noticed how much they would shine and thrive when they had good leaders, and I wanted to be a part of that. And so that's when I made the decision to go into working towards being a principal, because I wanted to have that same positive impact on teams so that they could have then that positive impact on their kids. So that's when I decided to go into leadership. And again, that's my definition, and that's how I've always walked in my leadership, is to build people up, to really make sure that we're focusing on their strengths. There's no hide the ball or gotcha going on in my leadership. It's really there to say, how can I be of service to my team, and how can I give them everything they need to be successful?
Wow. That is one of the most powerful definitions of leadership that you could give, specifically because, yes, being a leader also implies being a manager. Obviously, you have to take care of your spreadsheets and allocating times and building schedules. But there is something beyond that, that it looks like you were able to discover and differentiate very early on in your career. What were you teaching when you were a teacher?
Yeah, I started out in middle school, which is a riot because that's probably one of the last levels that I would go to now. It's really hard. I loved it, though. I started in middle school at Skinner, and I was teaching, back then it was ESL. Now it's ELD. So I was teaching, and I was ELA S, so I taught social studies 6, 7, and 8, and I taught language arts 6, 7, and 8. So I think at one point I had like 6 preps, but I loved it. Okay. I loved my kids. I loved my families. it was just so much fun. And as soon as I got started, because I didn't go to school for education, I came in as a non-traditional, I was doing something else. I got my master's degree in international administration or something like that. I have debt for that, and then decided I wasn't going to do anything with it. And then went into teaching, and I just found it was more than a job. I think that's when I realized the difference between a job and a career. And I got into teaching, and I had found my niche, and I was like, this is my career. I'm going to stay in education. I've been in education and DPS ever since.
So DPS is the only place you've been an educator where you've exercised your profession as an educator leader. You haven't taught anywhere else besides DPS?
Not in K-12. I taught English, right, as a language overseas in Venezuela and Mexico. But in K-12, it's only been DPS. And I'm a graduate of DPS, so that just made sense to me.
You're a graduate of DPS. I was reading your biography on the DPS website, and you went to East.
I did.
And where do you go for middle and elementary?
Well, I started at Park Hill just as until first grade. And then second grade, I moved over to Bromwell, which is really interesting because it's not even in my neighborhood. I grew up in Park Hill. But I think with the redrawing of lines back then, like the district functioned very differently. They redrew lines. Parents it wasn't like choice. You had to ask for an administrative transfer. And so they asked the district for a transfer if I could go to Bromwell, and we were granted that. And at the time, I didn't know why. I just, send me to school. I didn't care. Bromwell was pretty diverse back then because we had busing. And so it was a great experience. I had a great educational experience at Bromwell. I felt very welcomed. I felt like I had a lot of friends that looked like me. I had a couple of teachers that looked like me at Bromwell back then in the 80s, which was surprising. But then I went to Gove Middle School, and that's when it's no longer in existence, right?
I've never heard of that
And
before.
most of my Bromwell friends went to Maury. And so, of course, I wanted to go to Maury, but then, no, you're going to go to Gove. That was only 7th and 8th grade back then. It wasn't 6, 7, 8. So I went there for 2 years and then went to East and struggled when I went back to East because I felt that my experience at Gove, my educational experience and academic experience didn't prepare me for the level of work that I was going to encounter at East. So I had a really great, rigorous academic experience at Bromwell. Went to middle school, and that dropped. I didn't really have to do much. I didn't have any homework. I don't even really, I think I remember home economics. That's the class I remember the most, and the rest I just don't even remember. Wow. And then I got to East, and I had lost a lot of my academic habits. And so I think that also had an impact on later where I put my daughter in school. I didn't put her into a traditional middle school because I had still some of that trauma, like, middle school just didn't serve my needs. Funny then how I ended up being a middle school teacher, maybe for some of the same reasons, just to make sure I could, kids had a positive academic experience in middle school because it's a really tough age.
It is a tough age. That is also something you and I have in common. We both have been school leaders at the elementary, middle, and high.
Okay.
I've done it similarly as well, and I was an AP at a middle school, Grand Ranch.
Oh, right, yes.
It was challenging. It was a little tricky. When you were in high school, middle school, were you engaged in after-school activities? Were you, what was that high school life for you?
Well, through all of elementary and middle, I was involved in gymnastics and soccer full-time.
Nice.
It took up so much time. And gymnastics back then, you may have heard some of the stories. It was very traumatizing, like, the whole body image thing. It wasn't a healthy relationship that young girls had with gymnastics back then. I was in gymnastics 6 days a week, 3 hours a day. I really didn't have a lot of time to just be a kid. And so when I got to high school, I quit gymnastics. I just said, I'm not doing it. My parents are very supportive, continued with soccer. I made varsity as a freshman as I had been playing soccer since I was 5.
And East High
School. Now, I don't know. These days, that might not have happened. It's a lot more competitive. But back then, I made varsity
That's awesome.
and played at the high school level for a few years. And then, but I think because my academics and my behavior the first year and a half of high school was so bad.
Really?
Eventually, I said, I want to focus more on my school. And I stopped doing a lot of the athletics and got into some other activities, clubs and things. And then finally I got into student government my last year as I was still cleaning up, my past high school experience, and ended up being elected as the head girl. They call them head angel now, which is great. But back then it was called head girl, which was it wasn't the president, but you kind of oversaw the whole student council. Who knew? I didn't know I was going to get elected, but I thought, why not? I tried and I got in. And so as I went through high school, my focus shifted from, as a freshman and sophomore, sports and activities and doing all the fun things, and then to, well, how can I really tailor my experience to build that responsibility and get ready for what's going to happen after high school? And finally, I had a really rough start in high school. I had a strong finish in high school that really prepared me well for college, and then went to CU Boulder after that. So it was a great experience. Had a couple of hiccups, but all in all, my experience at East was really positive.
Wow. Looks like also your participation in after-school extracurricular activities probably gave you an edge in your social relationships, in the way that you will see school outside of just academic content.
Right, and I think that's really important, because I think, as my daughter also went to East, I made sure, I think those first 2 years, because I dropped out of gymnastics, I had too much time on my hands. So yeah, I did soccer here, but that was only in the spring, right? I had too much time on my hands, which allowed me to get into trouble, right? And so I think it's really important for students, especially in the middle and high school age, to continue to have those interests and extracurricular activities that they're engaged in, to keep them on track. I think that my daughter continued to do that even as a freshman, and she didn't have any of the negative experiences I had with behavior or all the other things, because she was engaged in really productive things during high school. So I think that's really important for kids.
I agree. I have learned as a school leader and as a teacher as well. I was a high school teacher at Lincoln. And teenagers, also the psychology literature talks about how teenagers go from belonging in their home with mom and dad, where you're like their superheroes, their role models. There is this switch that happens like right around 12, 13, 14, where they want to belong to another group, just not mom and dad. Like, you're not cool anymore.
Yep.
And you start looking that belonging, those groups where you can click and be a part of and build your identity.
Yep.
When I was at high school, I was a high school athletic director as well.
Okay.
And as an AP, I will always talk to my boys and girls about find a group of people that builds you up and that you belong with, because those friendships are going to last forever.
Right.
So I agree. It's super, super special, super important to be engaged in those activities. I'm always here, even at the elementary level. I am very strong advocate for having high quality opportunities for our kids after school, so they can also enrich their school experience.
Right. Yeah, it's so important.
Yeah.
Yep. So
then you went to college. Where do you go out of state to go to college, or you stayed here?
I stayed here. The funny story is I applied to so many out-of-state schools, right? It was like, I applied to, who knows, Tulane. I can't even remember all of them I applied to, and then ended up staying in state. Okay. And I think it was May of my senior year when I decided, no, I got scared. And so I went to CU Boulder, which was great. I had a great experience at CU Boulder. That's when I traveled abroad and did a semester abroad. But CU Boulder was a good choice for me. I wasn't ready to leave right when I was 18. I waited a few years to leave and kind of branch out. But yeah, I went in state.
Wow. When I came to the U.S., I went to Boulder. I got a scholarship to go there to get my master's.
Great.
So you went overseas. So you went abroad to finish your own educational career, or you went abroad to work, or both at the same time?
So when I first went, it was just like a semester abroad as part of college, right? It was, I think it was my third year of college, and then I was ready, right? Okay, now I'm ready to go see something else. So I did a semester abroad in Venezuela, and transferred my credits. I want to say it was through the University of Minnesota, because CU didn't have a program in Venezuela, but I wanted to go to somewhere that was so different from the traditional study abroad programs that were offered in schools. Like so many schools offer, oh, you go to Spain or go to Costa Rica or Argentina, right? But Venezuela, nobody had a program that would go to Venezuela, but University of Minnesota did. And so I went through that school to do my semester abroad in Venezuela, which was awesome.
How did Venezuela show up in your list of interests?
I think to be honest,
just random.
I had no knowledge of Venezuela.
Okay.
I knew all about like I said, Mexico. I knew about all the popular study abroad countries for Spanish, but Venezuela really didn't show up on too many lists, at least not where I was. You know, CU didn't have a Venezuela study abroad. I had to do a search. And internet was very different back then, so it was kind of hard. But I found it through the University of Minnesota, and it just sounded so different and so interesting. And I got some books about the country and said, that's where I want to go. And I wanted to go for a year, and then my parents convinced me, try a semester first and see how it goes.
And you went for one semester?
One semester. And then I didn't want to come back.
Well, that's a very special place for me. I grew up in Venezuela, and the coincidence of you going to my hometown, I still cannot believe it. The mountains, the Andes, Mérida. It's a very, very special place for me. All my friends and all the people I love, people who saw me grow up are there. Yeah. So you went from the University of Minnesota to Mérida to La Universidad de los Andes, or to...
It was a little private school. You may have heard of it, called Venusa. It was right there on the main avenue. And it was a private school that had this connection with the University of Minnesota. And I got credits. You know, I took several classes and I got credits for those classes that went onto my transcript. And then they transferred those to CU Boulder. And so it was great. I mean, it wasn't just to go kind of hang out. I actually went to class. But it was a different experience because part of their focus was to make sure that we had fun in the country and that we learned about the country and had time to know about the country and learn. And so we only had classes Monday through Thursday. They always gave us Friday off so we could travel and go see other parts of the country, which was great.
What kind of fun memories do you have from Mérida, from Venezuela?
Yeah.
Tell me the coolest ones, the
How
first
much
ones that
time
come
do we
to
have? I think it was the experience of just getting on like a bus, right? Getting on a bus, traveling hours on that bus, stopping off in little towns to get snacks and things like that, going to the beaches, which were just gorgeous. I mean, some of the most beautiful water and sand I've seen. And just, I think that also helped me build my own confidence and build my language, you know, back then, because I didn't really speak Spanish when I went. I had taken maybe 1 year in college. And so hearing the different dialects and the different accents and, you know, laughing when we couldn't understand, like in the east of the country, we couldn't understand anybody over there because they talk so fast.
So fast. Yes.
But just the traveling, the different beaches, the different towns we went to, and just building those friendships, not only with people coming from the States who are with me, but I still have friends that I am in contact with from Venezuela, and just lifelong friendships.
That's so cool.
That was the best part.
So you went with, I guess, a cohort of people from CU Boulder. Or from
I was the only student from Colorado in my group. So we had quite a few from, you know, Minnesota because they had the program. New York, they also were tied into that particular program. But I was the only student from Colorado. We had one from Alaska, one from Colorado, maybe a smattering of kids from the East Coast. But yeah, nobody from CU went with me in my group.
Gotcha. Were you able to stay in contact with the other people that went with you to Venezuela, or kind of everybody did their own lives after?
Everybody, most people I've lost touch with, but there are still a few that I still have contact with, which is so interesting. You know,
I know.
We're still in touch, and mainly through social media. Maybe we're not always a fan of social media, but that is one of the good positive uses of social media is you can stay in touch with people from a long time ago.
Yeah, that's how I stay in contact with all of my friends, family from Venezuela.
Yep.
And all over the world. I mean, I have friends from all over the place. It is funny because Venezuela has that unique, I guess it's not that unique, but it's very noticeable how you travel 2 hours from one town to the next, and people's accents is completely different. Like in Merida, where I am from, we are so like slow talkers.
Yep.
Even in English, I speak slowly. But then you go to the coast, and everybody's like, "What are you saying?"
Yeah.
It's like just one word put together.
I could not understand.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it
then
was so interesting.
The people from Caracas has their own beautiful, super amazing accent, and then the people from Maracaibo, it's very unique.
Yes.
I bet you ate a lot of arepas.
I did, and now I know how to make them too. So I
Nice.
make them as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I
love it.
The landscape in Merida, those mountains are beautiful.
They are.
Gorgeous.
Yes, and it's about the same altitude as in Denver.
Yeah.
So I had no issues with altitude sickness or anything.
Or anything.
And it's just the weather was great. We had a lot of rain at one point, the rainy season, but it was just the temperature was always spot on, in the 80s. It was great.
It's super good. That's one of the things I love the most about the weather. And in Venezuela in general, the weather typically stays, depending on the altitude you are.
Yep.
The coast is really hot.
Hot. Yes.
That is hot.
Really, really hot.
But the water is super clean and just
So
perfect.
pretty.
The
Yeah,
beaches are fantastic.
They are.
Um,
They are.
So you traveled all around the country. You had the opportunity to go to the coast. You did the mountains. Were you able to visit the Amazon or the Gran Sabana, Angel Fall?
Los Llanos, I did,
Llanos.
yes, but the Amazon, no. There was one trip that some friends went on, but it was so expensive.
Yeah.
And I decided to spend my money doing something else. Like somebody I'm actually still in touch with, she and I went on a different trip together that weekend, and we went to see like the sand dunes. So they have sand dunes, as you know, there too. Like, in Colorado, we have great sand dunes. And so I was so surprised. I said, they have sand dunes. So we went to see those, but got to the many different landscapes. There was one trip we took where we were in Los Llanos, and we slept in hammocks. It was 4 days, and it was roughing it, eating piranha. And that was probably one of the best experiences I had out there.
Yeah, Los Llanos is a very special place too.
Yes.
Wow.
Really beautiful.
So you learned, and that all happened in one semester.
One semester.
So that's very active, like a very active time there.
Yeah.
Your language, do you feel you learned it quick?
I did. I think you have to. I think another reason, now that I think about it, that I wanted to go to Venezuela is because I didn't anticipate a lot of people knowing English, and I wanted to learn Spanish. Whereas if you go to some other countries, there are quite a few people that already speak English, and I wanted to be forced to learn. And I lived with a family, too, so they didn't speak any English. So I think I picked it up. You start to get conversational in like 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. I could at least, communicate and say what I wanted to say and start to understand some of what I was hearing as well. Wow. But it was very fast. It was a lot faster than if I had stayed here.
That is definitely the best way to learn the second language. That happened to me. You didn't find many people speaking English in Merida?
No, not at that time.
What years were you there?
That was, when was it? 97?
97, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That was, late 90s when I was in Venezuela.
That was before Hugo Chavez and all the dictatorship happened. He became president in 98, and by 2002, it was very, very dangerous for tourists to go.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I wouldn't recommend people to have that adventure right now.
Right.
So I'm very happy you took advantage of it.
I got to go. Yeah, it was before they built the McDonald's in Merida. They didn't have any McDonald's. And then I remember when they were building it, and people had mixed feelings about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, that's when you get all those signs of what people define progress coming to those places, which basically just ruined the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because people stop eating their arepas for breakfast.
That's right.
To go and get whatever they eat at McDonald's.
And some of the best burgers I had were in Merida.
Oh, my God, yes.
Right. And McDonald's, I said, I mean, we from the United States, why would people go there when they have these great burgers down here?
Yeah.
So it was just a lot of mixed feelings about McDonald's.
So I bet you learned a lot in Merida, and then you went to Mexico.
Yeah, so the funny part, and I'm just going to jump around, I met my daughter's father when I was in Venezuela. And eventually he, a couple of years later, he ended up coming here. But before he could get here, he had to get paperwork and things like that sorted out, right, with immigration. And so to be a little closer to where I was in Colorado, he went to, at first, Juarez and then Cuernavaca. And so that's where I really taught, was in Cuernavaca, but it was only for 3 months before the paperwork came through. So I was there. I was in Juarez visiting quite a bit. And Juarez, that was back then, too, when Juarez was safer, and you could go just drive down. I'd drive down alone and cross the border and visit and have a good time and come home, And now, again, wouldn't do that today. But then Cuernavaca was beautiful and was only there for a summer.
A summer?
Yeah.
Teaching English as
Teaching English, yes.
And also learning a lot of Spanish.
And continuing to learn Spanish. I think something I also tried to do when I was not in, like, Venezuela or Mexico was, like, trying to get jobs here, because I was a paraprofessional with DPS in that time. And they used to call them bilingual para, not ILAS para. Things have changed. So trying to get jobs that required me to speak some Spanish so I could maintain that skill.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you finished those 2 abroad experiences.
Yes.
You came back. Well, you were basically living here as well, right? Like
yes.
You would go there just for a little bit of time. Then you came here, got a job as a paraprofessional, and then quickly became a teacher.
Well, it kind of jumped around. I was a para for a year. I worked in another private language institute in Denver, teaching English to students who would come over from other places. And then I decided, I really like teaching. I didn't know what to do after I got my master's. I was kind of lost for a little while because it was international administration. And that was right in 2002, right after 9/11 happened. Oh. So a lot of the jobs in that field were being moved over to, like, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and I wasn't ready for that. So I said, no, I've got to find something else to do. And I remembered how much I loved teaching, and that's when I looked at Denver Public Schools, and Skinner had a need for a teacher, and I applied and got the job and got into an alternative licensure program at the same time. And just from there on, I stayed in DPS since 2002.
You did. I also had to get an alternative licensure program. My master's degree is in Spanish literature.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
I came to the U.S. to get my master's.
Right.
I always tell people, who comes to the U.S. to study Spanish? Me. I came to get my master's.
Well, you had a lot to contribute, so I'm sure.
So, okay, you were at Skinner. Then I assume you became an assistant principal somewhere before you became a principal.
I did. After teaching at Skinner, I actually ended up in Montbello at the old Rachel B. Knoll Middle School, the original, and I was a student advisor. They don't even have that job anymore, but it's really working with behavior and discipline. And I was there for 2 years just to get some experience outside the classroom. I was still teaching, too. I mean, I did that as well, and was the student advisor at Rachel B. Knoll, and then became the assistant principal at Godsman. That was my first, like, school leadership role, which was really interesting because elementary was, I mean, it still is. Elementary is a huge challenge for me. So it was a good learning experience. I stayed at Godsman for 3 years, and it was fabulous for learning. But wow, kudos to elementary people because it's really it's really challenging. My strength is secondary. I found that out. Yes.
I spent most of my years teaching in secondary. I also taught elementary, and it is challenging in many other ways. It is also very rewarding on the emotional side because those little ones, they really just want to love you.
That's right.
They just want to please you, so they want your attention.
Yep.
So that the challenges we have in high schools and middle schools with disengagement, with kids not wanting, because they're too cool in some ways.
Yep.
In the elementary level, they want to be with you. They want to please you. Just tell me, I want to do it. Like that energy is what's overwhelming. But the elementary teachers, they also have to teach very clearly behaviors.
Yeah.
And it's so crucial because that's when you teach kids the love for school and, like those early behaviors that are at the foundation for everything else happened at the elementary. So,
well, we often at the secondary level say, go observe elementary like if you need to know how to differentiate or do a variety of different things at the same time and do it well, they're really good models for that. Because I remember when I was the AP at Godsman, just going into some of the classrooms, I was amazed. I mean, just the skill set from kinder, or ECE even all the way to fifth. I mean, the routines and the intentionality with everything they do is so intentional that, and I love our secondary, but it's a different approach.
Completely.
And there's a lot to be learned from some of those, routines and that intentionality that can help students as we differentiate at secondary too. So
100%.
Really good stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's very, very useful for a high school teacher to look at the elementary teachers and how elementary teachers are able to even read their kids' emotions and facial expressions. Like elementary teachers have this connection so deep. Also because an elementary teacher spends the entire day with that kiddo, right?
Yep.
Like in high schools and middle school, we have periods.
Yep.
So there is a level of transiency. I don't know if that's a word, but it's like I have you for 45 minutes or 60 minutes, and then I go with another group, and then I'll see you again, or maybe every other day. So
very different.
But then you went to Flowcrit. From Godsman or?
No, from Godsman, I was there for 3 years, and then I was the assistant principal at DCIS Baker for 4 years. And that was really the first time I felt like, wow, I got my master's in international administration, that it actually came into use because, I didn't go for education. And so the international studies school, like that really spoke to me and resonated with me because that was my passion. And so I was there for 4 years as an AP. And that's when I decided, I had been an AP for 7 years total at that point, right? 4 there and 3 at Godsman. And I made the decision then to try to go into the principal role, right? Because for a lot of reasons. One, I realized that as the assistant principal, I was always going to be dependent on whatever happened with the principal in a lot of different ways, right? Like they're the visionary, just a whole different set of skills, right? And also, even if the principal left, like would I even have a job? So there were so many things that started to come up, and I had 7 years under my belt as AP, and I thought I can do this. And that's when I decided for all of these reasons, I really want to build my skill and try to be a principal. And so after those 4 years, I went into the Learn to Lead for 1 year, and I was at Hill Middle School, Hill Campus of Arts and Sciences for a year. And then the year after that, I moved into the principal role at Flowcrit. And I was there for 5 years at Flowcrit.
You're very much loved at Flowcrit.
Thank you.
It's a place that definitely, you definitely shaped that place from your leadership. And I always hear how special you made that place on your years there. And I wanted to ask you, because I never asked you, how special that place it is for you. What do you learn there? How much you grew as a human being and professionally by spending 5 years there?
Yes. So for a lot of different reasons. I think one is very special because it was my first principal job, right? And so I had really reached my goal, right? I had become a principal, and I loved it. I loved being able to shape my own skill and grow my own skill in, as an AP, I was kind of like the worker bee, right? You have so many things you do, right? You got to do the testing and you do this. As the principal, though, it forced me to really grow my craft say, what is your vision and your why? Why are you doing this, right? What's your why, even in this building? And I don't think I ever really took the opportunity to think about it that way in the past because I was always doing things as the AP. But as a principal, I was able to really look at my why, bring people on board to that vision. I mean, all of that work, as we talked earlier about management versus leadership, it brought in the skill of building people and working with people and not just tasks, right? And so that's what I loved about that experience. But speaking to Flowcrit specifically, I mean, I had a lot of privilege that our girls did not have growing up, and I was still a single mom, right? And so I had some connection there. I knew, hey, you've been a single mom since, my daughter was 2, and you have built yourself and gone through challenges and been successful, and you're here, and you can be a model for these young women, right? And most of the girls were women of color, right? To say you can do it too, right? You have a child. Many of our girls were alone. That's okay. Having a child and being a single mom is not a barrier to you doing what you want to do with your life. And many of our girls, that became kind of my motto or my saying at Flow Crit. I'm like, there are a lot of things you have to do, right? You have to work. You have to do this. You have to take care of the house. You have to do all these things. What do you want to do? And so at Flow Crit, something that we really tried to push was, how are we building the post-secondary, the post-high school plans for our girls? Because many of them were coming in, like many Pathways kids, right? A lot of our kids are coming into high school hopeless, right? This has happened to me. I've had this experience. I've had this challenge. I have these barriers and whatever. There's no way I'm ever going to get to do that or be that or have that job, right? And our goal was to say, no, that's not true. They just needed to know what the pathway was and how to get there. And so we really built a system for our students to have, every girl had a post-secondary plan, which kind of mapped out what your interests are and what you might want to do after high school, and then what are the classes and the experiences you need to have in order to get there. And just seeing that there was a through line changed everything for so many of our students. I mean, we had the Med Connect program on site. We had CNA, and then it transitioned into phlebotomy. So we had one of the only phlebotomy programs in DPS. I know Emily Griffith, I want to say, has phlebotomy as well. But we had phlebotomy, and then we were looking at transitioning to medical assistant as well. They've also brought in the Ed Connect program, where girls are getting college credit for learning how to be ECE teachers, right, and to get into the educational profession. So we really focused on that post-secondary plan. So it wasn't like, girls, you're coming in and just take, these classes just because. It was like, this is to help you build to what you want to do after high school, and know that you can do it. It is possible. And so I could go on all day about Flow Crit and the experiences, but I think what resonates with me most is really what was so special is seeing girls come in and just be at the bottom rung of hopelessness, right? And just saying, I can't do this. My life is over. And saying, no, it's not. And seeing them thrive and grow over the years, and then graduate and have college credits or a certificate of some sort to go into a career field. We had one girl graduate with her pharmacy tech license. We had girls going into cosmetology and getting certified. So lots of opportunity that we just wanted to open up for those students, and that was the best part.
That is so special. That is so special to hear. I don't know if you're being too humble about this, or if you want to share a little bit more about this part, but I believe that your own story, your strength and the courage it took you to be a single mom, raise your daughter, and then stand up in front of them as a professional, successful, amazing human being, I am sure that also fired them up to be like, I want to be like, how did they call you, Miss Wright? Mm-hmm. I want to be like Miss Wright.
They called me Michelle. Many of them called me Michelle. We had a more intimate, and pathways are so small, that never bothered me. And I felt that was fine.
That was fine.
If they called me by my first name. Yeah. But yeah.
I think you absolutely were a role model to those girls too.
And that's what I think, as we talked about before, as a principal, you really have to get into your why. And like I said, I don't think I did a good job with that earlier in my career, right? I loved it. I love being a teacher. I love the kid. Like, the why was there. I just never really took time to sit down and think about it. And then when I got into the principal role, I was like, this has to be a good fit. I had someone tell me, we're not going to put you into a school that's not a good fit for you, because you don't get an opportunity to fit. Like, these kids need you. And this was just the perfect fit. I mean, he was absolutely right. This was the perfect fit. And the why was just so clear as soon as I got there and got to work with those students.
What do you think was your biggest accomplishment at FlowCred?
Yeah, I think, well, a couple of things. There's like the, technical and the managerial piece. And then I think really building trust. I think, you always are going to disagree with some of your team, but I think I built and helped build some of that collaborative culture that they were struggling with before I got there, because we had the school and then we also worked with the nonprofit that was on site. We had the ECE that DPS didn't oversee. That was overseen by, the nonprofit in Clayton Early College. And then we had the school-based clinic. So we had like really 4 different entities on campus. And I think that's always a challenge to get everybody to be working on the same page. And I think just by nature, I am a collaborative person. And so getting to collaborate with all of these different people who were there for the same reason to help these girls really succeed in life and thrive and, contribute to the community as moms, as leaders, as scholars, that was the best part, I think. The other piece, more technical, is just really working to set up that post-secondary program and that model for our students, because, I was even, like, they'd come in and say, well, why am I doing this? Why?
Right.
What is this for? I have other things I can do. I can work. I can, but they knew coming back into the school as a mom, they had to be there and they had to graduate, but it was more than that. And we wanted them to know it's more than just your diploma or your GED, right? It's you building yourself to what you want to do to be stable after you leave high school, right? And so I think building that vision and that model was really successful. And they're still building it. Now that I'm gone, they're still doing that over there
They continue
with
to
the
work.
girls. Yeah.
I think it's very powerful when you say that you were able to develop a vision and also give the girls like an ability to see through their current circumstances and what they can become, especially around bringing to your campus all these post-secondary opportunities, so they can see clearly how practical it is that you take these classes and then you will have the opportunity to work in this field.
Yes.
Instead of that hypothetical college, and then after that you figure out if you like it or not. Here, I think your strategy was more like, no, we're going to give you this opportunity, and actually you're going to be able to find a job or continue to further your education. So that's super powerful.
That was the goal. And, of course, it's hard to get to 100%, but I think what built girls coming in started to see that, right? Like, we have somebody who's going to sit down and ask us about our interests and really, kind of guide us into the different opportunities that we can take part in that'll help us get there. When before, you only know what you know and you only know what you see. And so if they'd never seen before a pathway to get to do what they really wanted to do with their lives, they would give up. And so I think that's, again, going back to pathways, and I think now that might even be a bigger conversation about school now post-pandemic, right? What are we doing to really make sure that we're giving that why to students, why this is important, why school is important, and how it's going to support you with what you want to do and what your passions are and your interests are after high school. We're not just here to help you get to the stage, right? We're here to prepare you for what you really want to do and what's meaningful for you after high school.
Yeah. This is making me think of how would you define equity? What is equity for you?
Yeah, equity, again, when I think of pathways, that is equity. Just what we talked about before in terms of what I love about pathways also is the ability and the flexibility to be creative. And sometimes people are scared, right, to do that because we have so much accountability, and are we lowering rigor and expectations if we do that? And, that's our role now, is to really work hand in hand with our leaders to make sure our expectations are still high. Our kids deserve that and they need that. And thinking outside the box on how to make sure our kids are successful with that. And there's not only one way, right? When things are canned, I don't think that's equity, because we're not looking at things through the perspective of the variety of different kids that we're serving. And so it's really, equity is meeting our students where they are, while also saying, no, but we have those high expectations for you because we know you can do it. And we're going to give you every opportunity to do what it is we know you can do and want to do in school and after high school. So whatever it takes. I mean, something that I love about Pathways leaders and their teams is they have this whatever it takes mentality. Well, we have a student who's coming in with these challenges. Well, we're bringing them in, right? We're going to do what it takes to serve this student. And many students who come in with a variety of different challenges or needs tend to be very successful in these environments at Pathway schools because of that whatever it takes mentality of the entire staff of, okay, let's try this. Or if that's not going to work, let's flex and do this. But we're not going to give up. We're going to continue to try to find the way to serve this student and help this student thrive. So that's equity. And I think Pathways is, I haven't traveled to all these other cities to see what they do with alternative campuses, but I can say I think that's something DPS does better than most is they have these schools available and these opportunities available. And so the fact that they brought the Pathways Collaborative back and those schools back to work together was amazing for me. And I think that was the very best choice because we need these schools and we need these environments for the variety of students we serve in DPS.
Yeah, absolutely. That's beautifully said. We talk here at CMS at my school. We define equity in 3 words. I have it posted on my PD room and data room. We talk about equity as opportunity, dignity, and love.
Yes.
Every kid, whatever it takes. We're going to give you as many opportunities as you need in order for you to achieve the excellence we know you can. Yeah. We're going to treat you with dignity. You're worth it. You are worth it. It's not your story. It's not your current circumstances. It's the potential.
Correct.
And you're loved. We love you. Of course.
Right.
You're here with us. We're part of the family. How do you make the connections or what do you see the relationships between equity and Black excellence?
So Black excellence, something that I want to be really clear about is I think with all good intentions, right, at the beginning of this initiative, our schools weren't prepared to really see the purpose, to see what this was for, right? And Black excellence is not meant to fix Black children, right? Black children are already excellent. And I think when we see Black excellence plans, for example, initially, and this isn't any offense towards because I don't think leaders were well prepared for how to do this well and how to shift their paradigm to make this really purposeful. But when, for example, we see a Black excellence plan say, oh, we're going to teach our Black children grit. No. Like our Black children already have grit.
Oh, yeah.
We're not here to fix. This is not meant to fix Black kids, right? Black excellence for me is how are we establishing the conditions in every school and every space so that our Black students can walk into their own excellence and they have the opportunity to walk into the excellence they already have. They're already excellent, but the conditions that have been prevalent in schools and in the educational system have prevented our Black students from thriving in the ways that they could thrive if those conditions had been different. And so I think Black excellence for me is really on the mindset of the adults and on the system to establish the conditions for our Black students to walk into the excellence they already have, right? It's all about conditions, and the conditions have not been ideal for Black and brown children.
That is the best definition of Black excellence I've heard ever, I think.
Big paradigm shift, and I think a lot of it, I've developed it over, even I can say I was just as guilty as a leader and as a Black leader at Flow Crit, and they say, oh, write this Black excellence plan. Okay, what is this? Really, when I think of it like that, though, over time, it's like, no, these plans aren't meant to fix Black children or Black people. We need to change conditions so that our Black children can thrive. And once that shift kind of developed and happened, it just became so much more clear for me that's my vision of Black excellence is really working to change and develop adult mindset, and so that we can change and improve those conditions.
Oh my God!
And we have a lot of work to do, of course.
We do have a lot of work to do. I love this definition. It's going to stay with me for a while. from my side, as an immigrant, I've been in the U.S. for 13 years only. So I got here, and my perception, my ideas of Black people, Black excellence, and what it is like to be Black, it's definitely conditioned by my experience with Black people in Merida, in Venezuela. We've been together and mixed for over almost 500 years. So the history of Blacks and whites and indigenous and criollos y mestizos y mulatos and all this mixture of races in Venezuela, it definitely gives you a way different idea of what it is like to be Black.
Right.
So when I came here to the U.S., to me, a Black person was just a Black person. Like I didn't add a historical charge of slavery and all the atrocities that have happened to the Black populations here in the U.S., although it also happened in Venezuela, but we've been mixing with each other for half a millennia,
right?
You know, so I see the way I saw Black people in Venezuela kind of gave me the advantage of seeing everybody as human beings, as wonderful, beautiful, and people with the potential that I also have as well. Yep. But coming here, a few weeks ago, I learned that Ruby Bridges is 67 years old. She is alive. Her kids are probably my age. The people who booed her at the school are also alive. So when I saw that, it was like a big slap on my face. Like, to me, was the realization of how recent the history is, how passionate we are about that history, wherever your position is in front of those facts, because it actually happened. It gave me a complete new idea of what it is like to be a Black person growing in the U.S., as opposed to a Black person growing in Venezuela or in Puerto Rico or Cuba or even Bolivia. You know, like Black people are all over this continent, but the conditions, the coordinates where you grew up determined your perception of the world. And it is very painful to see the history. And it is also a call for me to reflect deeply on these ideas of Black excellence. I only have one family here in my school who's Black. And I heard another principal talking about it, talking about Black excellence in the sense of Black excellence is important to me precisely because I only have one family. You know, it's not that they already are a minority in my school. I don't want to make him invisible. I want to unwrap the gift of those kiddos. So
that's right.
It's so heavy. It is, to me, so difficult to talk about. I guess not difficult. It's just very passionate, like very emotionally charged for me to know that there is somebody who's alive right now that was in the news a generation ago, and their kids are my age, who also have to see their mom. It's hard to heal those things, you know, like putting myself on the shoes of the people who've gone through that. And also as an immigrant, all the things that I myself have gone through. So,
and I think something you said resonated. I mean, also having the opposite experience growing up Black in the United States and then going to another country like Venezuela, right? And so the whole piece of colonization and with race and all of that exists in so many different spaces, right? The colorism, all of that exists in Venezuela, exists everywhere. And I think what I can speak to is I think the United States, the experience is so unique in terms of how systems were created here and why systems were created here, and you know, in really being based on skin color, right? And the separation of races was really critical for the United States to build what it wanted to build. And that's why this, you know, I mean, we could go on for a long time about this, but that's why the systems are the way they are, and they're built and set up so that our Black students and families cannot thrive, right? They're set up that way, and they started that way because it was very specific. There was a very specific need to separate races for the economic viability of this country. Whereas in other countries, while yes, there's colorism and colonialism and all of that, the country wasn't set up for that purpose. Here, it was very specifically set up for that reason, and so separation was critical. And we're still suffering from that. I mean, and even though we have moments where, in history, and I also, studied history and taught history, got my bachelor's in history as an historian. It's like, okay, we have like Reconstruction. We have these times in our history in this country where we tried to account for that,
Yes.
and always came back to the same. And I think what we're seeing now in our country is another example of that, right? When we try to push for better and we try to do better and fix some of the historical harms, there are people and forces in the country that want us to go right back to the way it was, because that's what benefits them. And so I think in DPS, what I see as a great opportunity, and I think we're very lucky to work in a district and with leaders who believe in equity and who believe in Black excellence and who believe in ensuring the conditions are there so all of our students, regardless of your story, can thrive. I think we're very fortunate because that doesn't exist everywhere. And we have places not only in the states, but in this state, in Colorado, who are really pushing against those initiatives. And it's scary, right? It's really scary how in this country the forces that set up the conditions the way they are now continue to try to maintain those systems. And it's unfortunate, but we can, make a difference with our kids, and that's when you go back to the Black excellence. I'm so excited that we are actually saying we need to change our mindset with what we can do, and we need to change our conditions so that our kids in DPS can thrive and walk into the excellence that they already have, right?
Yeah, I love that piece because there is nothing that needs to be fixed in our kids.
Right.
The Black excellence is not a problem that needs to be solved
Correct.
in our kids. Like, our kids are already magical.
Right.
They're this beautiful, unique, masterful creation of the universe. Like, they show up to our schools with their little hearts and their little brains, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with them.
Correct.
There's absolutely everything right with them. And the job that we need to do in our buildings is to unpack that potential with those babies.
Yep. Yep.
I think, I don't know, I have an hopeful view of this issue because it is unstoppable. Once we give our kids, as school leaders, principals, directors, we set up the conditions for every kid to thrive, it's unstoppable. It's just the human nature. It's the capacity that every human being has to overcome adversity and also to thrive in a healthy, encouraging environment. So I don't see, hopefully, with our work, I don't see these being something that we have to go back in 50 years.
Right.
Venezuela has its issues.
Sure.
I am
Everyone
not going to
does.
lie. And racism exists. I believe it will exist probably forever for the same reasons that other evils in human nature will continue to exist. But what I see in Venezuela more as a cancer, as something awful, is the social class.
Yeah.
If you're poor,
Yep.
I don't care if you're Black or white or, if you're poor, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Probably
noticed
forever
that.
and probably for generations to come. And the people that come to power, they have it very clear that power is an opportunity for their own individual advancement.
Yeah.
each
I
country.
saw that. I witnessed that there.
So
Yeah.
when you go to Venezuela and you go to the coast and you see kids barefoot with their big bellies, you see all skin colors.
Yeah.
You just don't see Black kids walking barefoot selling coffee on the side of the road.
That's right.
You will see white kids. You will see indigenous kids. You will see everybody. So
Yep.
there's a lot to do. But
A lot to do.
it is taking me to the next question I have for you.
Sure.
And it's, what lessons have you learned as a leader that have actually improved your personal life?
Well, again, going back to really focusing on who I am, what I value, right? And so as a leader, and this is what I think my father struggled with, that I think we can change, is as a leader, you also are a person and you're human and you have a life. And your life shouldn't just be about your job, right? We need to humanize our work. And so I always demonstrated that and modeled that as a leader, that it's okay to be human. It's okay to have a life. It's okay to need to take a minute to step back or take a day, and I think I really worked with my team in those ways, right? And I continue to do that, right? Because it's a value that I hold for myself. Nobody can survive just work, and nothing else, right? You have to have time with your kids. Oh, it's my kid's first day of school. Take that day. We'll figure it out. Oh, I have a spouse who's sick. You need to be with your spouse. That's the humanity of the work. And I think as a leader, being able to model that and show that I value that and that it's okay has been very rewarding in my role now, and even in my role as a principal. I think the other piece that speaks to that is one value I've really learned to notice and build up over the past 6-7 years is balance, right? I can always tell when my balance is off because you start going into that space where you're not really the nicest person, and you have to reflect and say,
oh gosh,
something is off. Like it's not anyone's fault. It's something is off in my balance. Oh, I'm working too much, or I haven't had enough time to spend with friends, or I haven't had enough time by myself to just rejuvenate. Something is off. And so I've really learned to start to reflect when I'm feeling that something is off, to say, what is it that's out of balance and how to get that back? And being a leader and having all the things you have to do and being busy doesn't mean that you have to give up your balance. If you don't maintain your balance, you're not going to be able to continue and sustain what you're doing. And in my role last year and this year, I've noticed, we have leaders that just work so hard. Yeah. They're exhausted. But so many of them are doing it because they want to give everything to their teachers. Uh-huh. They want to do whatever it takes to protect their teachers. And while that's great, and I think that's the very right move, what are you doing to rejuvenate yourself? Because I don't want you to burn out. And I worry about some of our leaders who haven't, that you can do that, but you've got to figure out the balance. And I don't have the answer for that. Everybody has their own strategies, but I do see some leaders like, I'm really worried that you're not going to be able to sustain in this role because you haven't figured out yet how to do both. I'm going to do everything I can for my teachers because they deserve that and they need that. It's hard enough, and make sure that I can still sustain the work myself, right? And be healthy. That's the question. And so I think for me, it's improved the quality of my life because I think I've figured out that ticket. But I've also learned how to say no, right? I think that's one strategy. I can't handle that right now. I'm going to have to get to that in a few, or I have to prioritize. There are lots of different strategies, but balance is really the key for me, or has been the key to maintain my health in this work.
And I'm sure you did not learn that lesson on your year one as a school leader.
No, I did not. I think that's where I started to pick up the need to do that. Especially, and as a single mom, I always had, because she came first, so I think it was always there, but I did have some years where I felt like I was just giving. And I was like, I can't sustain this. I can't, I'm not my best self right now because I'm doing too much here. So I have to take a step back sometimes and make sure that all the pieces are in place for me to feel healthy.
Yeah, I agree. If I were to answer that question, I think I would say something similar as well. I am on my 8th year as a school leader. Uh-huh. This is my 5th year as a principal.
Yep.
And after almost a decade, I am still struggling with it. But I have developed a framework where I have my non-negotiables, and I know that if I follow that framework, I will be good.
Yes.
At least good, I hope,
right,
at everything else. And it is, I need to eat healthy, and I need to exercise, and I need to practice gratitude. Whether you're religious or not, to me, it's important to just sit down and be like, I am pretty goddamn lucky.
Yeah.
I have these amazing teachers. I have this amazing wife. I have these beautiful kids. Yeah. Why I am so stressed out? Yep. And I'm stressed out.
Sure.
I'm still, like I was telling my dean of instruction the other day, we have the most beautiful start of the school year, but I still have 88 emails to answer. I still have a few deadlines, and it's like, but yeah, finding that balance is definitely a great lesson that I think professionally I'm learning to apply to my life.
Right. And how to, I think here in my role now, it's like how to coach people on that is hard because everyone has a different way and a different need and a different perspective. And I know principals struggle with how to coach their teachers on that because our teachers, I mean, I keep going back to just the load that they have, and how do we help them see that that's okay with everything that they know they have to do. It's just it's a struggle. It's a challenge,
It really
and it's
is.
probably something that's always going to be something we have to work on, right? But yeah, that's where we are now, is how to make the work sustainable. That's a big question.
And I think I don't hear very many people talk about this with regards to sustainability, but to me, something that I always try to talk with my teachers about is there has to be a relationship between making the load sustainable and finding it fun and meaningful.
Yes.
When you're engaged
Yeah.
on things that entertain you, that engage you, that that is exciting, you tend to work more strategically.
Yeah.
Or even if you have to work a little bit longer, at the end of the day, you don't feel that load on your shoulders. You feel a little bit more satisfaction. Mm-hmm. So as a school leader, there are many things that we have to comply with that are not that fun. It's not the reason why we do it. But if we mix it up with the things that give it purpose,
That's right.
you end up having, I don't know, the load becomes more bearable. Mm-hmm. And I always remind my teachers of their why. Like, find ways to connect with the fun and the joy of being in a classroom with kids. And then those lesson plans, those unpacking, those internalizations, those things that you don't know yet will enhance the reasons why you love what you do. Mm-hmm. And teachers typically are like, okay, I'll give it a try. Yeah. And so far it has worked, but it's a great lesson to have.
Yeah. And it's a constant work. Like that balance, finding balance, it's constant work. You don't just ever get there and say, I figured it out, right? Because something else will come that'll throw your balance again. You're constantly working to get to maintain that. Yeah. And we're always going to have those days where, like at the end of last, we had all the graduation days. So there were days where you're just running, but that's temporary, right? We know we're going to have those days and we're going to have those phases. The whole point is to try to bring the balance back. It's not to avoid difficulty we're going to have that, but how do we get ourselves back when we've gone through some things like that? So I think that's kind of where we are as a district now, post-pandemic. Like, okay, we've gone through these things. How do we get our balance and our joy back for what we do? And we talk about so many people have left the profession. I also focus on all the people who have stayed in the profession, because even if they're like at their last, on their last leg, right, they want to be there for the kids, and they know that's why they keep coming back, right? They love the kids.
Absolutely. So. It has been a real pleasure to
Yes.
record this with you.
This has been great.
I love your wisdom. You have had a lot of learning and experiences in your career. I really appreciate it. I wonder if, as we close up, if you have a message, a quick piece of advice for any new leader or any veteran leader who is now starting the school year and is finding it a little bit hard to be motivated. What can you share?
Yeah, I think, again, it's something as new leaders. I'm going to speak to them first, because new leaders are just getting into what this means. And I think, understand that your first year it's okay if it's not your best year. Yes. But you're still learning. And again, that goes back to that humanity. You're a learner too. You're just starting to try to figure this out. Give yourself some grace, but also watch and try to do that reflection. I know many of us have read that book, The 4 Pivots, over the past several months, which it was really eye-opening for me and really changed some of my thinking. But we've got to get really good at reflecting and knowing ourselves and what is impacting us, so that we can be our best selves for our schools and our kids and our teams. But give yourself grace and really start on that reflection. What's going well? What's not? How do I walk through this, right? Because there's going to be a lot of challenge. And any leader, new, kind of in the middle of a career, veteran, again, we talked about why we're here. I think I personally, continue to think about what is the positive, what am I able to do to support. That's what gets me going, you know, and even in this new role, like I really missed the principal role at first. And I thought, I don't know. But I say, what is it? What is the purpose? I had to go back to purpose. And for me, it's like I'm in service. You know, I want to provide service and customer service and support to leaders and teams so that they can do their best work. That's what is meaningful for me in this role. And everything I do every day and what keeps me going when I'm off balance is going back to that purpose, because that's what's going to keep me motivated, right? To continue going even when it's hard or when I'm disappointed in something. So I would just say continue to go back to that why. I know we've kind of, this might be cliche, we've talked about that a lot, and go back to your why, but it's so true. If you lose track of that, you know, it's going to be harder to get through challenges and find that agency and that resilience to get through. But if you know why you're there and why you love it, you'll be fine.
You definitely will. I always ask myself, is there anything better I could be doing with my life? And the answer is no. I am deeply committed. I want to spend the rest of my life doing this. And then, okay, if there is nothing better I can do with my life, how do I make this journey meaningful, enjoyable, fun? And then I backwards plan from there.
Yep.
So,
yep.
Wow.
And
Michelle,
have grace. Have grace. It's okay to not be perfect. It's okay.
it is definitely okay. And I actually think it's necessary to realize that you're not perfect, and also that you're in that journey of getting better every time. I'm reading some literature from the classic Romans, like Marcus Aurelius, his journey, and he has a sentence that says, what gets on the way becomes the way. The obstacle is the way. Like when we're going through life and those journeys come through us, and those those little unforeseen challenges get on your way, you don't need to get them out of the ways. You have to understand now they are the way, is the way you navigate through them. So giving yourself grace to navigate those obstacles is kind of
Wow.
a lot of wisdom here.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're a very special person.
Thank you. Likewise. Thank you.
I hope DPS continues to benefit from your leadership, and I hope you can stay around for a while.
Yes,
Thank
I
you
do
so
too.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Let's put this here.
Oh, that was great.
Thank you. Yes.
And I stopped coughing.
Yes.
I told you it's only like an hour, and then it's like it goes away. It's just awful.
Thank you very much, Michelle.
Of course. Thank you. I'm glad I got to take part in this. This is great. Anything to help.